In the icy pre-dawn light, what was meant to be a routine medical evacuation flight spiraled into calamity as a sudden snow squall hammered the small aircraft, sending it careening off course and down into an uncharted, windswept mountain ravine where Steffy and Finn found themselves standing amid twisted metal and frigid, knee-deep snow with engines sputtering their last, adrenaline surging through veins numbed by cold. The roar of the wind drowned out their frantic cries for help as they huddled together, Steffy pressing her coat tighter around Finn's shoulders even as his own body trembled with both shock and the burden of guilt that he had been the one at the controls when the controls froze, leaving them helpless against nature's fury. With visibility near zero and hypothermia creeping into their limbs, they dared not move far from the wreckage for fear of becoming disoriented in the white hell that surrounded them. But as night bled into morning and hope waned, a distant echo pierced the silence, a crunch of footsteps, the soft pop of ice under heavy boots, and then a figure emerged through the swirling flurries. Sheila Carter, gloves frosted, breath clouding in the air, her face a mask of determination mixed with relief at the sight of survivors. In a moment that defied every instinct rooted in past betrayals, she knelt beside Steffy and Finn, ripping strips of her own scarf to staunch bleeding and wrapping their frostbitten hands with trembling care, her seasoned hands steady despite the raging storm. She hoisted them one by one onto a makeshift sled formed from luggage crates and twine scavenged from the wreck, hauling them toward a ridge that promised cell reception, even as Finn protested. Choking on pride and a fierce resentment born of memories of her manipulations, Sheila persisted, her voice soft yet insistent, promising safety beyond the storm's reach, and behind her a distant helicopter's rotor wash droned like a promise of rescue. Moments later, as news crews descended on the scene, alerted by Sheila's own GPS beacon and satellite call, the narrative crystallized into a triumphant saga of the unlikely heroine who braved freezing temperatures and near-impossible terrain to save two of Port Charles's most revered figures. Camera lenses captured Sheila wrapped in snow-dusted glory, her voice cracking with emotion as she recounted their miraculous discovery, and social media exploded with hashtags lauding her courage and denouncing any who doubted her sincerity. Back in civilization, Finn sat swathed in blankets in a hospital ward, the sterile white room a stark contrast to the blizzard-choked mountains, and as reporters clamored outside for statements, he found himself aching with conflicting emotions. Gratitude for the woman whose deft rescue had preserved his and Steffy's lives, and guilt so sharp it pierced deeper than any cold could, for the way his fractured past with Sheila, her betrayals, her deception, made every memory of her care feel tainted by suspicion. Steffy, lying beside him within 4 lines snaking into her arm, stared into the news footage of Sheila's heroism with narrowed eyes and a tightening chest, convinced that behind every heartfelt word and tearful embrace lay a calculated ploy to rehabilitate her public image and, more dangerously, to draw Finn back into her orbit as the son she had once fought to possess. When Finn finally confronted Sheila moments later in the quiet of the corridor, she brushed off his hesitations with a measured calm that sent chills through him more potent than the alpine freeze, speaking of redemption, atonement, and the simple desire to help, while he struggled to reconcile the warmth that had coursed through her touch in that white wilderness with the coldness of her previous schemes. As Steffy watched from the doorway, her heart pounded with a mix of relief that Finn was safe and fury that Sheila's performance might win him over. Wondering whether the media's thunderous applause was enough to drown out the truth of Sheila's past and the warnings she herself had once issued about underestimating a mother's desperation. In the following days, the saga unfolded like a high-stakes chess match. Television anchors debated Sheila's motives with solemn authority, some hailing her as a phoenix risen from the ashes of her sins, others warning that her embrace of the spotlight was as perilous as any avalanche, destined to bring fresh destruction. Finn, grappling with sleepless nights haunted by images of the crash and Sheila's steadfast silhouette against the howling wind, found his gratitude morphing into an agonizing ambivalence. Tortured by memories of the love he once bore her as a child and the cunning maneuvers she had orchestrated to control his life, even as he felt a flicker of something like respect for her bravery. Steffy, meanwhile, launched her own silent investigation. Ordering forensic analysts to review Sheila's timing and travel logs, searching for inconsistencies that might reveal the rescue to have been more opportunistic than altruistic, and leveraging every connection in the media world to plant stories of her own, stories of silence and cunning, suggesting that a woman like Sheila would seize any chance to rewrite history and reclaim her fractured family. Their private war simmered beneath the public spectacle, each side deploying whispers and innuendo like snowballs in a relentless storm, as Ridge watched from the sidelines, torn between loyalty to his daughter and understanding of the complex bond between mother and son that had driven Sheila to risk her life even as it fueled his darkest fears. As spring's thaw began to melt the snow that had almost claimed them, the true drama lay not in the headlines, but in the rooms behind closed doors. Finn's late-night confessions to Steffy, fraught with guilt and longing, his voice breaking as he admitted that in those moments of peril he had glimpsed a side of Sheila he had never known, a vulnerability that begged for forgiveness even as his heart recoiled. Steffy, in turn, grappled with her own storm of envy and protectiveness, battling the fear that Finn's compassion might bloom into misplaced loyalty. Sheila, reinstated temporarily as a folk hero in the court of public opinion, sensed the shifting tides and began her own tender overtures, letters to Finn filled with concern for his physical and emotional recovery, offers to visit at the hospital that she always arranged just out of sight of prying cameras, her presence a whisper in the halls rather than the declaration of victory it once seemed. Through it all, the question that lingered in every shadow was whether a single act of salvation could extinguish the fires of betrayal, or whether Sheila's gambit would ultimately backfire, exposing the fractures in every relationship it touched. Steffy, refusing to yield, vowed to expose any hint of deceit, while Finn, haunted by the memory of Sheila's frostbitten hands on his skin, wondered if love and gratitude could ever be disentangled in a heart so scarred. And as the world watched, breath still suspended after the crash and rescue, the true test remained. Could trust be rebuilt on a foundation cracked by lies, or would this latest twist in the endless saga of passion and power in Los Angeles prove that salvation, once offered by hands stained with ambition, is the most treacherous gift of all? In the tense hush of the Grand Forester Estate's marble-floored foyer, late afternoon light slanted through the towering windows as law enforcement officers in dark uniforms moved with solemn precision, escorting Sheila Carter through the polished halls, her wrists bound by silver handcuffs that glinted like cold steel in the fading sun. Word had spread swiftly. New evidence had come to light. Text messages, forged medical records, witness statements that revealed Sheila's rescue of Steffy and Finn had not been the spontaneous act of heroism the world believed, but a meticulously planned gambit born of desperation to reclaim relevance, to seduce Finn with a narrative of maternal sacrifice and thereby shatter the fragile bond he'd forged with Steffy. As the lead detective, a steely-eyed woman with a notebook in hand, read Sheila her rights, cameras hidden behind ornate columns caught every anguished expression. The tremor in Sheila's voice as she insisted on her innocence, the resolute calm in Finn's eyes as he watched her taken away, and the furious triumph in Steffy's stance. framed by the plush settee where she had summoned Ridge and Finn to witness the moment their most dangerous adversary would finally face justice. The arrest itself had been a subdued spectacle, no shouting, no dramatic chase through windswept alleyways, yet the gravity of the moment echoed louder than any gunfire. Detectives arrived at a discreet safe house in the Hollywood Hills where Sheila had been conducting clandestine interviews with tabloid reporters, offering tantalizing hints of a lost chapter in her life she promised to reveal once her public image was restored. Instead, they found her poring over dossiers on Finn's latest psychological assessments, scheming the next phase of her comeback. In the back bedroom, beneath a pile of magazines emblazoned with "Sheila Saves the Day," lay a USB drive containing hacked files from Steffi's personal devices, proof that Sheila had accessed private messages between Steffi and Ridge, exploiting every scrap of vulnerability in their relationship. With these discoveries came the arrest warrant for identity theft, tampering with electronic records, and attempted coercion. Charges that, while minor compared to her history of more grievous offenses, held the power to strip her of any shred of credibility and land her back behind bars. Now, as officers guided her through the foyer and into a waiting black cruiser, Sheila's gaze swept the room one final time, lingering on the family portraits that lined the wall, images of Ridge and Steffi at their wedding, of baby Hayes cooing in Brooke's arms, of Finn in his doctor's coat, determined and compassionate. A flicker of genuine remorse narrowed her eyes for a heartbeat, then vanished, replaced once more by the hardened mask of calculation for which she had become notorious. She met Finn's eyes as he forced himself to stand, shoulders squared with burdens far heavier than any handcuffs. For a moment, time stilled, and within that gaze lay questions he dared not voice. Was there a part of her that truly cared, or was every gesture simply another move on her eternal chessboard? Steffi, her face pale as porcelain, but her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths, rose to intercept the detective, demanding confirmation of the charges and insisting on knowing whether Sheila would be held without bail. The detective, unfazed, produced the warrant and recited the list of offenses, each word a hammer blow that echoed through the vaulted ceiling. Steffi's lips formed a silent vow. She would see this through. She would ensure Sheila never threatened her family again, and she would stand guard over Finn's heart to prevent any residual sympathy from blossoming into dangerous compassion. In the master bedroom, Ridge and Finn stood side by side before a window overlooking the ocean, the waves far below a mirror to the turmoil in their souls. Ridge lay a hand on Finn's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and paternal concern. Finn closed his eyes, struggling to reconcile the conflicting currents swirling within him, relief that the arrest had quelled one chapter of fear, sorrow for the woman who had once been his mother's killer, yet whose hands had saved his on that frozen mountain, and a creeping emptiness at the thought that the tangled web of love and betrayal might never unravel cleanly. He whispered, voice hushed, "It's over," but Ridge, ever the realist, shook his head. "With Sheila, nothing is ever completely over," he said. "She'll find a way to make this about her again, even from behind bars. You must be vigilant, Finn, for Steffi's sake and your own." Meanwhile, headlines exploded across every screen in Los Angeles and beyond. Sheila Carter arrested, heroine or master manipulator? Evidence reveals rescue ruse, Sheila's true motives exposed, and Forrester family triumphs over terror. Public opinion split down the middle, some rallying to Steffi and Finn's defense, others lamenting the downfall of the woman who had so briefly ascended to hero status. Social media chimed with outrage and sympathy in equal measure, trending hashtags that turned personal tragedy into public spectacle. Brooke Logan, ever attuned to the currents of power and influence, seized the moment to issue a statement of support for her daughter and son-in-law, praising the tireless work of law enforcement and affirming that the Forrester family would not be intimidated by another of Sheila's schemes. Yet beneath her poised exterior lay a flicker of unease. Had her own crusade to protect Taylor and Ridge unwittingly paved the way for Sheila's resurgence, only to be undone by her next move? In the confinement of a downtown precinct, Sheila was booked, fingerprinted, and photographed. The sterile walls of the holding cell felt like a mausoleum for her ambitions. She sat on a metal bench, wrists chafed, her once lustrous hair tousled from the rush to flee her hideaway. Across from her sat a detective, eyes narrowed, flipping through the files of her recent activities. Sheila, who had always thrived in the shadows, found the harsh fluorescent light oppressive, each hum of the ventilation system a reminder of the brutality of the law. She lifted her chin defiantly, voice steady when she spoke. "You think you've won. But you've only played my hand." The detective, not intimidated, asked about the motive behind the rescue ploy. Sheila paused, lips curving into a slight, knowing smile. "Motherhood is the oldest game in the world," she said quietly. "And I always play to win." Back at the hospital, Finn visited Steffi's room with 2 steaming cups of coffee, the aroma a small comfort against the dark backdrop of betrayal and fear. As he entered, her eyes searched his face for truth. He sat beside her, offering a half-smile that trembled with regret. "She's been charged," he said simply. Steffi exhaled, tension draining from her shoulders. "I know," she replied. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" Finn nodded, but his eyes betrayed conflicting emotions: relief, guilt, and a deep sorrow for the woman now shackled behind bars. He took her hand gently. "I am, because you saved me, but I also feel responsible." I let her back in. Steffi brushed his hand with hers, both tender and steel. "She never deserved your trust. We'll get through this," she promised. As night fell over Los Angeles, police escorted Sheila into the holding facility's cell block, her silhouette framed by the barred doorway. Journalists clamored outside, their lenses trained on the window where she would sleep, but Sheila looked upward at the barred window, a spot of sky beyond her reach. In that moment, she was no longer the rescuer, no longer the scandalous schemer, just a caged figure whose every move had been laid bare for the world to dissect. Yet within her chest beat the heart of a survivor. And as the cell door clanged shut, she whispered into the darkness, "You may cage the body, but you can never imprison the mind." In the days that followed, formal hearings were scheduled, attorneys sparred over bail, and forensic analysts presented irrefutable proof of her digital manipulations. The Forrester household, once a stage for glamorous fashion launches and whispered family secrets, transformed into a fortress of vigilance. Security codes were changed, patterns were altered, and every visitor was scrutinized. Finn and Steffi, bound together by the trauma and the triumph, held one another close in the moonlit solitude of their bedroom, acknowledging the deep fissures left by Sheila's deception and their mutual resolve to rebuild trust on firmer ground. Ridge and Brooke, united in purpose, worked behind the scenes to manage public perception, fearing that any hint of discord could inspire another of Sheila's opportunistic gambits. And across town, in the sterile corridor of the courthouse, a judge read aloud the charges and set a bail so prohibitively high that Sheila Carter, infamous and indomitable, found herself forced to contemplate the true cost of her ambition. As the gavel fell, sealing her fate for the moment, whispers rustled through the gallery of redemption denied, of justice served, and of the unending saga of love, betrayal, and power that bound them all. Yet even as handcuffs clicked and cameras flashed, one undeniable truth remained. In the world of the bold and the beautiful, every downfall carried within it the seed of a new rise. And every prison cell could one day become a stage for an even greater spectacle. And so, as the night deepened around the LA skyline, the story of Sheila Carter's arrest stood not as an end, but as a prelude to the next dramatic twist in a saga that refused to be confined by the bars of any jail.